What is up, y'all? Welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're all doing well. So, as you can see from the title of this video, I want to discuss relative density disequilibrium. This is something that I think needs to be addressed, and we're going to do that in this video. But before we get into it, there's something that I really want to make clear. The purpose of this video is not to attack anyone or insult anyone for their beliefs. That's not what this is about. This is not personal. This is strictly about the information. I have a feeling that some people are not going to take this very well. They'll probably have a negative emotional reaction to this. Respectfully, that's not my problem. I will not be responding to any hit piece videos attacking me in regards to this video. I will not be responding to any negative, hateful comments from anyone about it. I'm an adult. I'm concerned with the objective truth. This is about the information. I'm not interested in playing back and forth, tit for tat, character assassination games with other people on YouTube. So there will be none of that coming from me. So I want to make that clear now. This video is strictly for anybody who believes in relative density disequilibrium, or RDD for short, but you are willing to consider that maybe you could be wrong about that. Maybe there's another explanation. Ultimately, you are someone who cares about the truth and you're intellectually honest enough to consider new information about it. So with all of that being said, let's get into it. I think a good place to start is by talking a little bit about why I decided to put this video together in the first place. So over the last several years, there have been many new flat earthers to come into this arena, okay? And if I had to guess, I would say at least 90% of flat earthers, probably more, believe that we live on a stationary Earth, believe that matter physically accelerates to the ground, even though that's never been physically measured to be true. And when you try to ascertain the cause of how matter accelerates down or how matter is sorted the way that it is in nature, the most typical response you get is RDD. And so I've been questioning a lot, how many flat earthers know what RDD is? Because most people will explain the effects of buoyancy and density when you try to inquire further about relative density disequilibrium. Now, another thing is that within the last year, I came across a few flat earthers who couldn't understand why. Now, mind you, they believe in RDD. Couldn't understand why they couldn't find any information about relative density disequilibrium on any physics forums, scientific websites, or platforms. They couldn't find any MIT videos breaking it down or anything like that, right? The only information they could find on that specific topic was in conjunction with flat Earth, and this was confusing to them. Now, this made me kind of question, well, how many actually know where RDD even comes from? Considering the fact that there's a lot of people out there now peddling RDD as if it's a scientifically proven and demonstrable thing, I'm sure there's probably a lot of flat earthers, especially the newer ones, who have been misled into believing that that's true. So there's been several people that I can think of over the years who have went through all the reasons why RDD doesn't work and is wrong, okay? But what I want to do in this video is I want to go back and I want to before RDD was actually a thing and had its name, and I want to talk about how that came about. Where did it come from? That kind of thing. Because I think it's important that people understand how they've been misled and are still being misled into believing in what is simply a conceptual construct that was made up by flat earthers years ago and given its name. So that's what we're going to get into next. So we're going back to the middle of 2018, all right? There is a group of flat earthers who are aware that the heliocentric narrative of gravity as it's been sold to us, whether that be Einsteinian or Newtonian, is off the table, right? It is not the cause for the motion of matter we see in nature, right? So they are now questioning, well, if it's not gravity, what is it? What is causing all of this? And one flat earther brings forth a demonstration that many of us are familiar with. I know I did it in school. Many of you probably did it too. It's the classic density buoyancy egg test, okay? And he decides to repeat this test for himself. So for anybody who doesn't know what the egg test is, I would just encourage you to look it up online. Density buoyancy egg test, you'll find what I'm talking about. For the rest of you that have a belief in RDD, you should already know what I'm talking about. So he repeats this test. He adds salt to the water, the medium, effectively increasing its density, and lo and behold, the egg begins to rise. Now, there's a couple of things here that are really, really important. All right. This is where your false interpretation of an observation comes into play, right? So they know that the only thing they've changed is the density of the medium, and the egg rose. And that, coupled with something they don't see, which is an obvious force that they can point at and say, look, there it is. It's pushing the egg up. You can see it, moving it upwards, right? Because they don't see that. This now convinces them, and many other people, including myself, admittedly, sadly, that inanimate matter doesn't need a force to move it. And because they only change the density of the medium, they're now convinced that density and buoyancy explain everything, right? So this is how interpreting an observation, relying solely on your visual perception to tell you what is going on, is a bad idea. And we're going to get into that a little bit further as we go along. Now, at the time, there were a few people that were, basically objecting to the things that were being claimed, like, saying how it's wrong. But one person in particular is very important to this story. There was one person who was vehemently objecting to the ridiculous notion that inanimate matter can move by itself, that it doesn't need a force to move it. And this person was speaking the truth, okay? The majority of the things that he was stating was true. He was saying things like, inanimate matter can't move by itself. It needs a force. Yes, I know you cannot see an obvious force that you can point at, but there has to be one there because we see the effects of it with that egg moving upwards, right? He was saying density and buoyancy are the effects of a force. They do not cause themselves. That is circular reasoning, right? So he's stating all of these facts. And even I missed it. Even I missed the truths that he was telling. Now, the ironic thing about this is that this person that was speaking the truth at the time is the same person who would go on later in this story to formulate or construct the conceptual idea, right? And give it its name, relative density disequilibrium. But as I said, he didn't start out that way. He started out by speaking the truth, by stating facts about physics and how these things work. Now, what he got in response to speaking the truth was mocked, he was ridiculed, he was belittled, he was ostracized at times, he was called names like Flat Earth Society pincushion, Flat Earth Society shill. He was treated terribly by the people around him. Okay, now, obviously, I could sit here and speculate on why it is he would go on and, throw all that truth out the window eventually and change his position. But I don't think it's very hard to figure that out if you just think about it for a minute. But that's not really what this story's about. I just want to make sure that I mention that part because it's important. So, as I said, even I didn't hear what he was saying. The mistake I made is that I didn't really process the information that he was sharing. I had no understanding of basic physics at the time, and I didn't realize that there were these necessary mechanisms that I needed to comprehend in order to figure out what was actually happening. So, like many other flat earthers at the time, I made my conclusion based solely on my visual perception, what I was seeing within the demonstration. And I agreed. It didn't need a force. So many other flat earthers did the same thing. They relied on their optical interpretation. And relying on your optical perception is a terrible idea. All it takes is one false interpretation for us to end up in another faith-based belief system. That is how we ended up within heliocentrism. Because the majority of what makes up heliocentrism, it is based on visual interpretations. How many times have we heard the boat disappears from the bottom up because it's going over the curvature of a spherical earth? That's all it takes, is in making that interpretation based solely off what you see visually, and wham, here we are living on a spherical water rock gyrating through an empty void. And if we are not careful, we're going to end up in another faith-based belief system, not that much different than the one that we've left behind. If you really think about it, what a lot of people believe in now is not that much different. They've traded a ball for a flat earth, right? Both the ball and the flat side believe that matter physically accelerates to the ground, which is also based on an optical interpretation, right? What they're seeing visually. And then the only difference in the cause is that one claims a conceptual thing called the theory of general relativity that they got from Einstein, and the other believes in a conceptual idea called RDD that a flat earther made up. Or I should say flat earthers, because he didn't just make it up on his own. He had help. Other people had their input in it as well. And he just kind of put it all together and then gave it its name. So that's where we're headed with this, if we are not careful, for another faith-based belief system. Over the course of the next year, okay, there would be many discussions that would take place between flat earthers, globe earthers, regarding this demonstration and what it meant. And by the middle of 2019, relative density disequilibrium is now has now been formulated into something, right? This conceptual construct, and given its name. And that is what a lot of flat earthers were now using to explain all these things we see in nature. Now, let's talk a little bit further about RDD and what it supposedly is. If you listen to random proponents of RDD, it can be quite difficult to get a grasp, to find some cohesiveness, some substance in what they're saying, okay, and how they're describing this. But if we look to the person who takes credit for it as their own, right? In fact, I'll give you a little quote. They themselves say that they, quote, put RDD on the map. If we go with the way that they explain it, which who better than to get the description from than the person who takes credit for it, right? It goes a little something like this. There is a disequilibrium between an object and the medium that it's in. The densities are off. So the object's density is either higher or lower than the density of the medium it's in. The disequilibrium between the two, okay? And this disequilibrium somehow manifests forces out of nowhere, and the object will either go up or down, depending on its density relative to the medium, as this inanimate object seeks its equilibrium once again. Now, I don't know if you caught the contradiction there or not, but just in case you didn't, let me point it out for you. They will start by telling you that inanimate matter doesn't need a force to move. But then they'll go on to describe how these forces manifest out of thin air, which is absolutely not how forces work in physics, right? This is incorrect. So it requires a belief on your part that forces can manifest themselves out of nowhere, right? Inanimate matter is often referred to as dead matter for a reason. It's because inanimate matter has no sentience. It has no will of its own. It can't make decisions. There's no mechanisms whatsoever within it that give it the ability to move in any way, shape, form, or fashion. It's not seeking anything. It doesn't do anything. Inanimate matter is just there until a force acts upon it. So anytime you see inanimate matter in motion, you know that a force is either acting upon it or has acted upon it. And that force is external, right, and separate from that object itself. It's really that simple. There are principles or objective truths, objective facts that we have to rely upon so that we stay on the straight and narrow when we are in the middle of an objective inquiry, so that we remain objective. So, for example, knowing the fact that inanimate matter cannot move by itself and needs a force external to it to act upon it, to put it in motion, if the people all those years ago would have relied upon that fact about life, that fact about our physical reality, RDD would have never become a thing. But unfortunately, what it's turned into is now a bunch of people peddling it to anybody who will listen, right, and have faith in it, that it's some scientifically proven and demonstrable thing, when it isn't. The only thing they can demonstrate to you are the effects of buoyancy and density. They can't show you these forces manifesting themselves. And it gets a little confusing too, because sometimes it's described as if these forces manifest within the matter itself. Sometimes it's described as if the forces manifest externally. Sometimes they describe it both ways. It just depends on who's explaining it at the time. Look, at the end of the day, I can sit here and I can go through this long list of all the reasons why RDD is wrong, but what is the point? It is a conceptual, made up thing, regardless who made it up or gave it its name. It is conceptual. It does not exist. It is not real. It is based off of people misinterpreting what they're seeing and what is actually happening in a demonstration, only showing the effects of buoyancy and density being manipulated, which is already well understood. It's not a secret. Everybody knows density and buoyancy. We get it. At the end of the day, RDD requires your faith in it, to believe in it. And you shouldn't have to believe in demonstrable physics. So that's where they mislead people, because they show you the effects of buoyancy and density, and because you know that's real, right? That's demonstrated to you. Where they mislead you is by explaining the cause of that to you. But they can't demonstrate to you that cause. So the whole purpose of this video was to reach out to those of you that might be newer flat earthers, that, maybe you didn't know about where RDD came from. Maybe you don't know all these things. I hate to see anybody misled. And I'm praying that the intellectually honest among us or out there that may see this video may realize it's just a belief. And if we continue down this road of beliefs, we're going to end up in another faith-based belief system, no different to heliocentrism, which is exactly where we're headed now. And I really, really, really do not want to see that happen. So I hope that you will reconsider your belief in RDD and understand that it is only a belief, and that's all it's ever going to be. So there you have it. That's the video, guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something here. Y'all take care, and I will catch you guys again real soon. See you later.